Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast for another day of cyclism. We've got the double header Paris and Tirreno-Adriatico, both in cool conditions. Paris, we had rain again, but not snow, but still very, very cold. A long stage, 210 kilometers from Saint-Julien-en-Saint-Albin to Beurre-Latin. It is a sprint stage in theory. The final 3-4 kilometers are crazy narrow with road furniture and in the wet, like really, really scary stuff. There's three categorized climbs of 2.5Ks, 5%, that sort of variety. They're in Provence heading south. And then there's a bonus sprint on top of a 1K, 6% hill, about 20Ks from the finish, and a bit of crosswind predicted. Tailwind as they head south, and then they turn east, southeast, and then they have a cross tailwind. So very, very fast stage. But there was some other news pre-stage, Benji, regarding the weather tomorrow.
Well, two bits of news, actually. First of all,
true.
Jonas Vingegaard did not start today's race. The second leader of Visma Leasebike after yesterday's crash early on in the stage. I think I saw an interview by Grisha Nierman that said, we needed a miracle seeing Vingegaard yesterday to be able to put him on the bike today. He didn't even end up going on the bike this morning. They knew already yesterday evening, basically, that he wouldn't be riding today. So they weren't close enough to Lourdes, is what he said. So no miracle, no Vingegaard in the race. That is unfortunate, but in my opinion, a good thing that he's not starting and not pushing himself under these potential injuries, because in the grand scheme of things, for Vingegaard, Paris is just not that important. So there's more important things in a season, and he needs to prepare for that and needs to put his body first in doing so. Now, that changes the dynamic a little bit, because Jorgensen is now a solo leader in the team, which, with the stages that are left, it's always easier when you have two people in GC in position 1 and 2 than if you have one person in GC in position 1. That's my personal opinion, obviously. But in front of us, you said it already, today's stage, but also stage 7 and 8. 8 is the usual when it comes to the potential raid stage, medium mountain kind of vibe stage on the last day of Paris. Always a banger. Every single year in Paris, always a great stage. The 7th stage was a mountain stage with La Colmian, big climb, and Oron, a big climb after that. So 2 climbs. Now, like we pointed out yesterday, you told me first a couple of days ago that the weather wasn't looking good for stage 7. And well, that is indeed the case, but they decided to not necessarily go out there and straight up cancel stage 7. The conclusion is that they have a backup plan, which is taking out the second last climb, La Colmian, which is the only other big climb outside of the last one in the stage. They're taking that one out. So we've only got the Oran finish, the one climb at the end of the stage, which is still a notable climb. It's not insane. It's not like 15 kilometers at 9% or something. That's not what's happening. I think, is it about 7 kilometers, 7%, if I recall correctly?
Yeah, it's not too dissimilar to Loge des Gardes. The difference between that stage and this stage was there was a lot of climbing in this stage with La Colmian, and a long climb. So now it becomes, still some, they do the Côte d'Aspremont, but they go up a false flat drag to Isola, which they do in the big ring. And it's actually, I would say, advantage. But before the stage, it was advantage Jorgensen because he loses the only mountain support he maybe had in Vingegaard, and then UAE, they could have played on, if they set a pace on Colmian, on Oran. But anyway, we'll see.
So it's better for Jorgensen on paper that La Colmian is out.
Yeah, I would say if you gave him 2 sprint stages to go, he would take that, right? Because he's in the lead. So you want the simplest stage as possible when you're in the lead. But today's stage, breakaway went with Remy Cavagna, as well as Gachignard from Total Energy. Jakob Truba from Caja Rural joined them, and the gap never went out. And I never saw on the ticker who was controlling.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't say Soudal Quickstep have taken control of the peloton. Maybe I missed it for Tim Merlier because it is a flat finish. Didn't say. And yet the gap was always 2 minutes. And then also we saw just before coverage, or maybe half an hour before, Truba and Gachignard wait. They just sit up. And that suggests that the peloton is drilling it because, at 70 whatever Ks to go, if they're just giving up, that means it's not a normal leash they're being given.
Now, I'll be honest, I may or may not have been in a little bit of a slumber at this point in the race with about 60 kilometers to go. And suddenly, I get a phone message by Le Krefte, our producer, that's basically saying, get to work, guys. There's echelons. And well, we see on our screen suddenly a Visma Leasebike team time trial with, in the background, an Ineos team time trial. So 2 separate groups of roughly 8 riders each. And then behind that, a long gap before we see the rest of the peloton. Gaps were created in the peloton. A split was created. Was it echelons in a crosswind segment, or was it in a descent somewhere?
Apparently, Campanart sent it over the top of the climb into the descent. Splits happened, and then you got wet roads, a bit of crosswind, not crazy crosswinds, like 15 Ks an hour, also a fair bit of tree coverage. But then if it's already split, this is why we had that debate about, is it easier to split it in the Middle East or Europe, Benji? If it's already split and in a line from the crazy road furniture in Europe, then, yeah, you feel that 15 Ks an hour more. And we see, a TTT of Visma. All 6 riders left in the race are in front. Zangler, then Athenia is pulling, and so you know it's serious. And then behind we see about 5 red jerseys that all looks like Ineos Grenadiers, not maybe 8 seconds behind, 10 seconds behind. I couldn't tell where other GC riders were. What was clear, Benji, was Almeida and UAE were not there.
Yeah, that is very correct. They were not there. Now, that first Visma Leasebike and Ineos TTT kind of comes together after a little bit, not imminently, but after a little bit of chasing. Ineos gets to the front with their team time trial. The other riders in those 2 groups that are also now with Visma Leasebike and Ineos in that first group, we've got Lipovic with a teammate Sobrero. We've got Skjelmose and Pedersen. We've got Jorgensen, obviously, with 5 teammates. We've said that. Arensman with 5 teammates for Ineos as well. We said that. But also Schachmann from Soudal Quickstep. I keep forgetting that Schachmann is riding for Soudal Quickstep. It's such... And also, seeing Cavagna in a Groupama jersey felt so weird. I'm not used to some of the transfers yet. I will probably in a couple of months be like, okay, I'm not used to them being in that jersey. But it obviously didn't help that in the group behind, the peloton behind, which, to be honest, gap was already over half a minute, 45 seconds. We saw rain jackets everywhere. Then we figured out that there wasn't just one group behind, there were 2 groups behind. Like you said, Joao Almeida, I think he was in the second echelon at that point, but then we suddenly see Bahrain riders waiting from the second echelon to the third echelon. And I was like, okay, Lenny, where's Lenny? Lenny Martinez. He was blown away Sosa style into the last echelon. And if you're in the second group, the second echelon, you might have like a 5% hope of coming back in this race. But if you're in Martinez's group, you're done for.
Exactly. He would eventually lose 8 minutes. Poor guy. Yesterday he wins, and today, he gets not the perfect stage for him. Cold, wet, crosswind, long stage, fast on the flat,
and
tough.
It's literally perfect. The formation of the first group, the fact that Ineos has 5 teammates, the fact that Visma has 5 teammates, the fact that Lipovic has Sobrero, the fact that Skjelmose has Pedersen. The facts on the road are simple. There's so many domestiques in that first group. We're talking 12 riders that will keep riding for their leaders, including their leaders will take turns. Good luck finding 12 domestiques in the second group to bring that down. And it's not as simple, because it's not just basic maths of 12 versus 12. We're talking Mats Pedersen, who shredded the group the last couple of days. We're talking Affini, who's a bloody good time trialist ruler on the flat. We're talking Zangler, who's spending his energy, same with Pedersen as well a little bit. Zangler, who's spending his energy pacing in this group a lot of the time, even though he has on paper a chance of winning the stage if he sprints for it at the end. So the teams are seemingly going all out for their GC rider. Yeah, Tarling as well. You said it.
Like, that's the thing. It's the perfect group, as Benji said, because Trek got stage plus GC. Visma got GC plus stage. Maybe Jorgensen is more important than Zangler's stage, but Ineos, they also have stage with Watson as well, a fast finisher. So they're not only just committed to pulling the gap out for GC, they're committed to pulling it to the line, to extend that GC gap and for the stage. So, because not like a sprinter, if Quickstep make it with Merlier, they don't care if the gap's 10 seconds or 1 minute 40. They just want to win the stage. So with the GC guys in there, with Almeida, McNulty, Champosin, Tejada, Martinez not there. All the other teams committing. Lipovic's really impressive. Like, he's been so impressive this week. Sobrero too was really good today. They make it. So yeah, I think maybe if Bora don't make it, it doesn't make a difference. But then you have Mullen maybe pulling in the group behind or another guy. So, and it's also the guys in front made it for a reason.
Yep.
They made it because it's the biggest trucks. And then the GC riders are all rolling through too. Aronsman, Foss, and Jorgensen, trucks. That's not happening in the group behind. It's Oliveira and a couple of FDJs.
We're talking about the riders that made it there for a reason, but we've spoken about this numerous times already. How much of Joao Almeida not making it to this group is positioning on the climb versus being prepared for something unexpected to happen in the first place? It feels like there's little nonchalance involved sometimes.
He just doesn't react. It's really a shame there's no coverage. Like, I wonder what position he was in. I doubt UAE were at the back of the peloton.
Yeah. So,
like, Bora were alive to it. It's race sense. Like, Florian Lipovic comes from biathlon, but he makes mistakes too. You know, he maybe attacks too much, pulls a bit too much on some climbs, but he's like aware of the race. And yeah, I mean, Almeida on a 2K 5%. I also think it's a wet descent. Visma with, Campanart sends it.
Yeah.
And also, they don't have the rouleurs here. We saw that in the TTT. So but it's exploitable. It's like Pogacar has no weaknesses. Even if you bring Pogacar here with no team, he's making Group 1. He would just tack onto the back of the Visma train.
And even the one thing that people have brought up, including us, is that Pogacar might have lost maybe a little bit of like his short burst acceleration at the costs. Well, and oppositely has gained a lot more on the long climbs and in the 2-minute power, etc. That's not exploitable for GC purposes, that acceleration difference, because it's not like Vingegaard's better at it than Pogacar, So the one thing that you might point out when it comes to Pogacar is maybe there's like one thing there that has changed over the last 2 years. Is it net positive for the rider? With Almeida, that's not the case. This is not a net positive. It's something really exploitable, and it cost him time today because, spoilers, that group of Almeida never comes back. And he loses significant time. Giro.
We knew on the climb to Koi after Bondone, one of the random stages, we're like, right-hander, send it straight away with Koos, it'll split, and then he has to chase the whole way.
Yeah.
It's so everyone knows. But yeah, sorry, Benji.
From this point onwards, we've got the first group. Cavagnar's caught and dropped, by the way, I'm pretty sure, right? Because I didn't notice him being caught, nor did I notice him being dropped.
Maybe I think he got called back to pull.
That actually makes some sense. Anyway, from this point onwards, we are waiting in this scenario until the intermediate sprint with about 20-ish kilometers to go. You pointed at it already. It's a bonus second sprint at the top of a 1 kilometer, 6% climb. We see Skjelmos and Jorgensen very active. Who of the two initiated it? Because I saw it when Jorgensen countered Skjelmos. Did Skjelmos do something first, or was it Jorgensen from the start?
I think Trek maybe with Pedersen started to lead it out because it stalled, and then Jorgensen just jumped.
Okay. Jorgensen ends up taking the 6 seconds there, head of Skjelmos and Lipovic, extending his lead on both riders in GC. And then we're once again in a bit of a rest, right? Like, did you see anything at the bonus second sprint that might indicate who might have the biggest chance of winning the stage from this group?
Zangler looked cooked. Zangler was struggling on a 5% hill, which he was good on yesterday. He looked cooked. And he'd also been pulling the Echelon Open initially. And I think Watson looked pretty sprightly. Tarling looked really strong. Like, Tarling was closing when the gaps to Jorgensen was there. Tarling's the guy driving it shut. Pedersen's also, he's not overcommitting. Skjelmos is not the GC leader like Jorgensen. They don't have other teammates here. He basically, he still commits and rides in the group, but he's not over-investing like a Feeney's got one purpose. So I think, I thought Pedersen and Watson were the two favorites for the sprint. Behind, we see it basically give up. That's what you always see, Benji. If the front echelon, the longer they keep the gap stable, the front is winning. Hot take. because the longer you are keeping that gap the same, the more tired the weaker riders who are weaker in the first place in the second echelon are dropping away. There's less cohesion. And we saw it. Quickstep would come to the front pace for a bit. Stop. Merlier's like, fuck it. Don't care enough today. Tudor pace for a bit. Stop. Jayco for a bit. Stop. And then it's just poor old Oliveira pacing. It's like, well, he's going to drop soon. And so you know the gap's actually going to go one direction because Affini, Foss, Tarling, like, they're not going to stop. We get to the finish. There's barely any playing. Oh, yeah?
About that, there's barely any playing around, but did at any point you expect rolling attacks from the teams with numbers, Ineos and Visma?
I thought Chef and Foss would go.
Okay.
/ Aronsman. Because Ineos got, like, Jungles, they've pulled all out. Jungles and Lemon are cooked. But I thought, well, it's not like Chef is going to win GC. And it's also Jorgensen doesn't have to react to him straight away. Yeah. It's not like he's going to win by 25 seconds. So I thought Ineos would roll. I thought, Visma were all in for Zangler. In hindsight, cold, wet day, pulling on the flat, that benefits two people.
The weight of the yellow card on his shoulder.
Yeah, he can't deviate. He doesn't want to chop anybody. Whereas actually Strandhagenes loves this weather. So could Visma have played it? I think Visma were like, let's get the biggest gap possible to fuck over Almeida. And then Zangler, if he wants to, he can go for a sprint. But actually, it was just Schachmann. And there was opportunity for it. This finish was crazy technical. If it had been a bunch sprint in the wet, it would have been, straight up ridiculous. Thank God it wasn't. And there was opportunity to let the wheel go. Schachmann goes left. He's covered by an Ineos. And then they bring him back. Schachmann then just continues. He's got Pedersen in the wheel. Pedersen jumps early. Tarling's taken his wheel from Zangler. Zangler obviously would have wanted to be on Pedersen's wheel. Pedersen launches early. Tarling can't come out of the wheel. Zangler basically sits down 5 seconds into his sprint. And Pedersen, cold, wet, hard day, chopping off in the crosswinds. Only one winner. He wins. Sam Watson was in wrong position. He threw the corner. Watson lost it. On that left-hand corner, he comes fast and actually takes third. Off Zangler, Tarling second, Sobrera fifth, Sheffield sixth, Skjelmoser seventh, Jorgensen eighth, Schachmann ninth, Aronsman 10th, Lipovitz 11th. So in terms of GC, Jorgensen stays 40 seconds more or less ahead of Lipovitz, takes a few more bonies, 4 seconds more on bonies, 59 seconds ahead of Skjelmoser. Aronsman moves from 8th to 4th on 120. Almeida's group loses 1 minute 54. 1 minute 54. And despite that, he only moves down one spot on GC, but he's now on 240. That's clearly, so game over in terms of the GC victory. And Foss moves from 16th to 6th on 247. Sheffield moves from 18th to 7th on 254. McNulty moves down a spot to 305. Champoussin Tejada stay put on 322, 324. Romeo loses any hope of a top 10. Same with Gull. Same with Lenny Martinez, because they are in a group that finishes on 9 minutes.
Hot take. First of all, a cold take. Joshua Tarling's sprint was good. He came next to Pedersen, didn't go over him, but that sprint was pretty damn good. Hot take. Within the next 6 years, Joshua Tarling wins Paris-Roubaix in a 3-up sprint on the Velodrome.
I just
it's
see
a hot take for a reason.
I see Tarling not taking it to a sprint, but it's a hot take for a reason. Exactly.
Because I was impressed by that sprint. I was like, "Ooh, that's like a Ben Turner kind of sprint."
If there's a wet Roubaix, Tarling's got to be one of the favorites.
Yeah.
I mean, he already in a dry Roubaix is one of the favorites. So, an interesting stage, Benji. Shame we didn't see the split. It was very, very fast stage, 47.3 kilometers an hour in cold conditions, over 210 kilometers. Visma will be happy. Jorgensen's GC looks a lot more sure because the best climber in this race looked like Martinez / Almeida. UAE were the threats because without Vingegaard, if McNulty on 1 minute and then Almeida on 30 seconds, if McNulty attacks, Jorgensen has a problem tomorrow. That's less of a problem now with him on 3 minutes because then other top 10 guys will just close it. Like Ineos will just pace. with McNulty and Almeida where they are now to protect their top 3 on GC. So UAE eliminated. Trek will be happy. They came here for a Pedersen stage win. He gets it. And probably this is the only way he could have, Benji. His sprint didn't look that fast.
I agree. Small group sprint, Miss Pedersen, in this case, perfect scenario, because if it's a larger group sprint, a bunch sprint, he probably won't winning the sprint. He, on like a hill stage or a medium mountain stage, he's shown this year that he's brutal. It's like he slightly shifted as a rider type, where he was more, he was already a classics rider with a sprint, but he seems even more versatile, perhaps, or more endurance during those efforts in those types of races. Maybe at the cost of a slight bit of a sprint. Maybe we're over-analyzing. That's also a possibility, but his sprint has not been super impressive this year. And I'm saying that on a stage where he won in a sprint. So that's just my opinion. But I am impressed by him as a rider going to the classics, though. Like, he's still on paper for me for Milano-San Remo as well, even though I would like to see a little bit more of a sprinter, because in San Remo, people are still going to be looking at Pedersen as a guy that can win the sprint from the group, after the Poggio. Like, they're still going to be looking at him like, you close it instead of me if Ganna goes off the front. Make sense?
Yeah, definitely. You don't want to go to the finish with Pedersen. In terms of anything else from, I think, let's preview tomorrow's stage then. So definitely huge GC ramifications before tomorrow's, I guess, sort of high mountain stage from Nice to Oran. 110 Ks. Bonus sprint on Isola on the false flat uphill. It remains to be seen whether the race will finish. We could see them riding uphill in the snow, like Tirreno and Quintana won. I think Lenny Martinez wins this stage with solo, because he's on fucking a million minutes on GC, and he's also, I would say, top 3 climber in the race.
That is very true. I've got Almeida on my list for this mountain stage, because I won the GC fight for the stage win. That's my personal desire, and that's going into why I pick Almeida. And I also think that still he has shown to be the better climber in this race so far. So if it goes to a GC battle, then I'm going for Joao Almeida in the end, regardless of what time he lost today.
Today is why UAE put Ayuso over him in the hierarchy to lead the Giro, by the way. It stays like this.
Yes, but also I think UAE should control tomorrow over Almeida.
I mean, yeah, it's like, what better way to pick up your spirits than winning the stage?
Yeah, and it's a short stage anyway, 109 kilometers.
And who's ahead of him on GC? So
a lot of people.
Aronson's on 120. Over the 2 stages, can he take back 140 on Schelmoser and Aronsman? No.
But at this point, just getting the stage win is fun, no? Like, just because you took an L today in GC doesn't mean you got to throw a potential stage win away tomorrow, is my take.
I think it's going to be hard to win the stage if you're the aggressor on these sort of gradients rather than coming from the back. But yeah, we'll see. Maybe they'll go for it. Maybe there's more bad weather. I'm picking Lenny Martinez. Okay, Tirreno at East.
No, I agree. Good pick.
Tirreno-Adriatico, we had the hilly stage where we would see Ganna, Healy, Pidcock, Van der Poel fighting against each other. Over 3,000 meters of climbing, 205 Ks from Ascoli Piceno to Pergola. The last 2 climbs, 6.2 Ks, 5%. And then the last one, the Monterolo, is really irregular. 4K, 6.6%, but there's loads of pinches. You could visually see it really undulating. So there's like 10% pinches. The last 300 meters is 8.6% descent into a false flat uphill drag. We've seen the breakaway win this sort of stage, or nearly win it in previous years. We've seen Van der Poel win solo in this sort of stages. We've got Ben Healy, who's won a Giro stage like this. So it was actually a really perfect stage for the start list we have here.
That is very true. Now, when it comes to the difficulty of that final climb, it depends on how it's written, of course. But on paper, that climb is good enough for an Ayuso to make him maybe make a difference on the others. But then UAE needs to be able to shred it, etc. But also, the breakaway needs to be caught by then, ideally, if you want to win the stage. That's also a hot take. If there's a breakaway ahead with 100 meters to go, then it's going to be difficult to win the stage from the peloton. The breakaway of the day, Gal Glivar of Alexandre Meurice of Alpecin. Paul Orselin of Cofidis, Decathlon with Dries de Bond, Frederik Dversnes from UNOX, Manuele Tarozzi once again, the KOM guy from Bardiani. Now, this breakaway as a whole, pretty solid group actually, but did it show any indications to you, the fact that Alpecin sent 2 riders in the breakaway that are not named Mathieu van der Poel?
Yeah, I thought it was because they were playing the 2 cards. They could win because Glivard's a good rider. They could win in front. It also means they don't have to pull. Alpecin don't like pulling or controlling races, particularly in stage races. They really don't like it. And so, but in the end, it looks strange. In the end, it looks strange when you look at the results. So, but I wasn't surprised either, because what if I thought the climb was going to be way more selective, and I thought the GC riders were going to kick off earlier on the steep parts. So I didn't mind it because I wasn't so confident Van der Poel would make a finish if Ayuso, Pidcock and co kicked off.
I think that's a very fair take. And from that point onwards, that breakaway forming until like 30 kilometers to go before the 2 hills, not much happened in the race, to be honest. We had Dunbar crashing out. That's something notable. Unfortunate to see that. And then we started the Salita di Barbanti. On that climb, the gap to the breakaway was still, the break still had a proper gap. We saw rider by rider dropping from that breakaway. We saw a move from the peloton with Chris Hamilton and Nicolas Prudhomme. Those 2 riders went off the front a little bit in the peloton, but that kind of became a chasse patate. Hamilton dropped first of that chasing group, and then Prudhomme blew back to the peloton as well. So we basically were moving towards the Monterolo, and I gotta say, Monterolo sounds way too much like Mortirolo for my taste, but it's a very different climb. We hit the bottom of that climb. We see an attack. Chavez anticipating early on the climb from the peloton. He gets caught pretty quickly because UAE is starting their tempo, and that's exactly what we need to see if Ayuso wants to make a selective difference on this climb. UAE needs to shred the tempo and set a tempo that destroys the group basically before Ayuso can launch it. And I feel like that didn't really happen. Initially, there was a bunch of riders that dropped, the people you'd expect to drop on this climb. The group thinned out to 50, 40 riders, whatever. Quintana then tried a bit of an attack, got caught pretty instantly. But when Del Toro took over, by the way, before we get to Del Toro, breakaway, Dversnes is slowly dropping every single person in that breakaway group, the Norwegian guy on UNOX. So ex-Norwegian champion, he's going off the front. The gap is now roughly 30 seconds on the peloton, where Del Toro is pacing. What did you notice when it comes to the tempo of Del Toro?
He was riding slowly or like steadily on the uphill steep sections, and Del Toro's also got that Almeida in him. He likes to ride to a really set power, and especially when you have Ayuso second wheel, as the crest on the undulation would begin, he would surge really hard, and you could see the elastic stretching in the group. And it was a big group. Like, Ineos hadn't fully committed to control the stage. They'd sent a descent off one of the longer climbs. Didn't really change anything. The crosswinds were banned once again. So yeah, it really, I didn't get the sense that UAE were going all out, setting up the train for Ayuso. I didn't think he was necessarily like terrible, because Del Toro was still pacing hard, but he wasn't doing like a lead out either.
It seemed like it definitely wasn't enough to put the peloton on enough of a stretch to then set up Ayuso to attack. It felt like it was a tempo where the peloton looks too much like a blob on the climb instead of a line. And that's when you notice that the tempo just isn't there for the actual lead out. So it felt, the more and more I was looking at it, it felt like they were waiting for the last steep segment to the top, which I think the last 200 meters or so were like at 8%.
Yeah.
So a bit of a punch on top of this climb, which that felt like what was happening. But you got to keep in mind, Frederik Dversnes is still off the front. 27 seconds, 28 seconds, back to 30, back to 27 on this climb. And I got to say, halfway the climb, I thought he was perishing, because everybody in the break was perishing. But that was on a steep segment. And then over that steep segment, his motor started turning again, and he looked really okay on that climb. So he tops the climb with, let's say, 27 seconds on the peloton, where we do see a move. We see Ayuso doing a bit of a punch on those last 200 meters. Was not the most brutal attack, because to be honest, Pidcock is on the wheel. Pidcock's always going to be able to follow Ayuso on this climb, in my opinion, if Ayuso makes that move. We see Pidcock on the wheel, but also the entire climb, Filippo Ganna was at the back of the group, looking like he was perishing. But as people dropped, passing them and staying at the back of the group, But when Ayuso made that move with Pidcock in the wheel, Ganna was in P3 at that point. That was super impressive, right?
Yeah, he was climbing really well, looking good for the Poggio Cipressa. Pidcock counters hard. I think Pidcock didn't have the climb that would have suited him. I see David de la Cruz finished with him on the same time. I think Pidcock needed a harder pace to set up the punchy attack. We saw in Strada Bianca on the punch, he was the only guy to go with Poggi. He could have had a much harder pace. And then if he's going into the descent with a group of 4, with the peloton stretched, more tired riders, maybe it's a different sort of stage, but that doesn't happen. He does send it into the descent, and this is a note of warning for everybody, every top rider. It's easier than done. Do not let Ganna in front of you on the Poggio descent. Don't do it. He will lose the wheel and fuck your race. And I think he had a flat on the Poggio descent in last year. And it's not. He's also huge. He's bigger turning circle than Pidcock, but we can see Pidcock and Ayuso gap him first corner on the descent, and he's pedaling all out trying to chase those two. Ayuso's a great descender as well. Van der Poel eventually has to do it, I think. And we're still split though. Simon Yates is on a gap. Other riders are on a gap. It's a group of maybe 10, 15 riders. Derek G moved up just in time. He's the last guy in the group. Doesn't miss it today. But it was good for Schwersnes, Benji, because Pidcock's not got separation. He's not going to drag the group 5Ks false side uphill in his wheel. Van der Poel's got no teammates to pull. Yeah. Well, it's just going to be random attacks from people.
But I swear that at the bottom of the descent, the gap was visibly 5 to 10 seconds. It was not huge. And that's where group dynamics come in, like you mentioned, where those people will not be willing to close it for the others around them, because everybody's kind of isolated in that second group. And therefore, Dversnes' gap extends a little bit. We see Cataneo trying to bridge, I'm pretty sure. That doesn't really close it. He falls back to the group behind. Derek G tries the same. The Plus tries it. So many riders try it left and right, but it just ain't happening. By the way, Ben Healy can't try it. He was dropped on the climb itself. That was a bit disappointing, I'll be honest. And we're starting to get towards the last kilometer, and I'm like, okay, Dversnes might actually be able to pull it off. A breakaway, a full day in the breakaway, on the climb, dropped everybody. Then after the climb still has a half a minute. At the bottom of the descent, barely any seconds left. But the group dynamic just gave him a gap again. And into the last kilometer, we do see a move from Tom Pidcock on the left side of the road that looked pretty brutal. But it's Mathieu van der Poel closing that. Obviously, Van der Poel needs to be able to follow if he wants to compete. But Mathieu van der Poel closing that means Pidcock stops doing his effort, and then the gap is still there towards Vernes. At what point were you like, okay, this guy is never going to get caught?
When Catania actually attacked and no one really responded, and then they just slowly went back to him, and then the other group came back of Simon Yates and co came back, because then I was like, well, there's no Alberson to lead out. Everyone's looking at MVDP. Pidcock's got no teammate to pull. Ganna, I think, had a mechanical on the descent or some problem. I think he then has another mechanical within 3Ks to go. Right? Yes. So he drops his chain, and so he's out of it. The UAE kind of lead out Ayuso a little bit to make sure no one gets a gap on him. I think Yates or Del Toro pulling. Yeah, look good for Sversenez, and indeed he wins. He's a very strong rider. He won he's won a fair few pro races, like in the French circuit, and he's won, these sort of hilly races where you got to have an engine all day. I don't think he's won a stage of this difficulty before, but he's beaten good riders with solos like Vauquelin in these French 1.1 races. He's sort of a late bloomer. He was on who was he on? He was on Team Co-op or Coop in 2021, I think.
But
and he was good in Arctic race.
Wasn't he one of the 3 X riders that were in position 2 and 4 at the end of Alula Tour?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, he got second in Alula Tour. which that's a pretty damn good result as well. On top of that, I remember podiums from this guy last year in Pays de la Loire, maybe? Like those French 1 week races as well, on top of the 1 day races. So it's like, this guy's had results, nothing of this level, to be clear. But that's what breakaways are for. This rider would never win from the GC group, in my opinion. So he got to put himself out there. Some days the breakaway has no chance. Other days the breakaway does have a chance. UNOX is in a lot of breakaways. And today it pays off. And also, Johannesson was in the group behind, I'm pretty sure, marking moves. And in doing so, making it more likely for...
That's right, he was.
For the man in the front, Vesnes, to actually take the victory. So I think they played it as perfect as you can.
Yeah, so UNOX get a big win, and Van der Poel wins the bunch sprint behind for second. I was expecting him to try and attack or counter off somebody to get across to Vesnes. Yeah. There wasn't really a launching pad to do so, and he was isolated. But in the end, his teammates pulling that breakaway to such a big gap, Benji, makes him lose the stage by 7 seconds. So it's true. Like they had 2 in the break, and they were pulling Glivar really hard, Murisa. So I guess I don't think it was necessarily the wrong tactic, but
it backfires.
It backfires, yeah. Adria third. It's a simplistic way of looking at it too, because if there's no breakaway, it might not even come to a sprint. Then people really try to attack for the win as well, and he still would have been isolated.
Yeah, and maybe if Glivar or Murisa had a better day, then the race goes a little bit different. But at the end of the day, I'd say Van der Poel's level looks good for Milano Sanremo. I never really had a doubt in that in the first place. The same for Ghana, looks fantastic for that. He points it at the descent when it comes to Ghana. That's a valid point. But I don't know. I feel like his ascending will probably be solid enough to remain in the Grand Group that makes it over the Poggio. If he makes it over the Poggio in a group, I would expect him to stay within that group in the descent. Then his opportunity is attacking on the flat after the descent, you know? But other riders in this, when it comes to, what do you expect when it comes to a Pidcock in an MSR-like race?
Pidcock's going to be one of the big favourites for the race. He nearly won last year.
And was he also not the guy that in the year that Jasper Stuyven won, just before Stuyven launched, Pidcock was about to launch and then got blocked in?
With Van Aert. He was with Van Aert on the descent.
Yeah.
Van Aert was closing him or something. I can't remember. Pidcock looks $1 million, and I think the climb didn't play out the way he might have hoped. Could have been harder. Rouge Adria, another good result, third. Ciccone, fourth. Ciccone quite fast. Sprinter. Arambaru, fifth. Pidcock, sixth. Gregoire, seventh. Johannesson, eighth. Bilbao, ninth. Velasco, 10th in terms of GC. Ben Healy drops out of the top 10. And that's the only top 10 change because he got dropped on the climb. Just seeing where's Hindley looked good to me. Where's Hindley? I think Hindley looks quite good. So let's preview tomorrow. Tomorrow's the only uphill finish. It is quite a soft Tirreno route. I think Ganna's going to pace himself. It's a hilly stage beforehand before they do the Frontignano climb. Usita, 7.6 Ks, 8%, although they give it HC categorization. It is irregular. There's 2 kilometers at 10% in the middle. That's where you have to drop Ganna. If you're UAE, that's where they're going to open it up to put Ayuso ahead and put Ganna under pressure. And so, Ganna's going to ride his pace. Ayuso, though, has to be careful because he's 7 seconds ahead of Tiberi. You know, that's a bonus sprint. So he has to be careful that if he's doing all the work and he's not so superior and he has to bury in the wheel, it's not and he has to keep Ganna behind. Yeah, it's tricky for him. Tiberi's on 29 seconds, G's on 34 seconds, Vulcan 41 seconds. But I think Hindley looks really good. He looked really good today. So I think Hindley's going to be top 3 strongest tomorrow uphill.
The fear that I have with Ayuso is that in the last week at Tirreno, he's been too eager to take up work himself when his team is not there to do so, and doesn't just let the race play out every now and then, you know? Like, for example, on the 14-kilometer, 3% climb he had a couple days ago, very different situation, but his team was not present there, and he kind of took the role upon himself to bring back Healy, which he should never do that. He should let another rider try and close that in the attack, another rider there, that kind of storyline, and that's the fear I have when it comes to Ayuso. So on paper, before this race started, I would have said Ayuso needs to win this stage. but I haven't been super impressed today. But I'll stick with my guns and I'll go with Ayuso.
I think Pidcock wins. He's behind enough on GC that actually Ayuso doesn't have to worry about him because he lost so much in the TT. He's on a minute. He's 40 seconds behind Ayuso, and there's just a basic sprint stage tomorrow. So I think Ayuso pacing with Pidcock in the wheel is a possibility. Another man who is really good on these sort of finishes, just lost to Roglic in the past in Tirreno in these sort of sprints, is Giulio Ciccone. What happened to you, man? Where is he? On GC.
11th.
Yeah, Ciccone looks good. He's also far enough from Ayuso that Ayuso can ride with him in the wheel, unlike a Chiberi.
But
yeah, sorry, can I change to Ciccone? Am I allowed?
You're allowed to change to Ciccone.
Okay.
But what do we expect from Filippo Ganna? 22 seconds ahead of Ayuso. On paper, he's not a pure climber. No shit, Benji.
Does he hold on to T10?
But I believe I reckon he holds on to top 5.
Nah.
Something's going to happen. I'm telling you. We're going to see. Ganna's been on. But halfway to climb today, I was really worried. But the fact that he still had it in him to move to the front and follow that attack of Pidcock, that was super impressive. I feel like we're going to see something Dumoulin against Froome Vuelta stage style.
Yeah, you could be right.
I could also be very wrong.
He should definitely hold on to top 10. But Ayuso is still the favorite for GC, but it's tricky. It's tricky for Ayuso because, he can't. If Ganna's riding a set tempo and is climbing really well and he's on 40 seconds behind, well, and Ayuso in the last K, he can't stop because Ganna can come back. And then if he's got guys in the wheel, it's problematic. So UAE, you're going to have to play it. I think, they have to accelerate on the hard section early and put Ganna behind. And maybe Ayuso doesn't go there.
Yeah. I'm just looking forward to it, to be honest. Like, we've seen a lot of action this Tirreno already, but nothing in terms of like an actual like climb, which tomorrow should give us. So let's see if Ayuso has it in him, because that were the expectations before the race.
Yep. Okay, that was our recap of Tirreno. That's all from us. We've got the double header tomorrow, of course, on Saturday, Paris-Nice. Both uphill finishes. On Sunday, there's Binder, but otherwise there's not too much racing on this. It's actually a pretty thin weekend of racing on the minor calendar because of Paris-Nice and Tirreno. So good. Thanks for listening as always, and we'll see you with the recaps tomorrow. Ciao, ciao.